All right, welcome back. We are COMP397. That's web game programming, kind of, and mobile web and mobile game programming in the winter 2021 semester. And it's week 10, part one of our broadcast. And we're going to be talking about procedural world generation today in brief. And I mean that in as in a real intro using the Unity game engine. So that's where we are. But before we get there, last week we kind of did scriptable objects, saving and loading, and there's a bit of an addendum that I have to do there. That's what we did last week. This week is supposed to be not this, but actually it's supposed to be procedural world generation, and it's really an intro. And what we're going to be doing with this is we're going to use a couple of techniques. So technique one, random map generation, right? That's technique number one. And technique number two, we're going to be using Perlin noise to generate a map. Okay, so it's kind of a different way of doing things with Perlin noise. Talk about what Perlin noise is in a bit. And the other thing we need to do is fix up. There's a bit of a bug with my saving and loading. So fix saving and loading bug, which I'm going to do right away. And I got to talk about this because it's a bit of an issue, and I forgot to include that piece with you guys. So I'll just fix it this time. All right, so that is what we're really doing this week. So now, in terms of what's due, Lab 10 will be due this Saturday as normal. Assignment 2, Part 2. So that is, if you look at it down the line, it is next week where we do multiplayer networking. That's going to be very exciting for multiplayer networking. We'll do a very simple multiplayer example and how that works. And we'll talk about TCP versus UDP and that kind of stuff. So again, we don't have very many weeks left. We have really one release left. So next week is your second last release is when it's due. And the final release is due at the end of or the beginning of week 13. And then you'll be doing your final presentation that week, which is showing me your final version of your game. So that is all worth marks. Your final presentation is taking the place of your final test. There is no final test in this course or exam. So remember that your final presentation, if you don't show up for it, you get 0. Even if you worked on it with your team and whatever, you need to be physically present on that day, on the days of the final presentation, in order for you to do it. And we'll talk about how I'm going to do this. That was the original intent before we did COVID, to be honest, before COVID happened this year. So I may have to change the criteria around this, which means you might be able to submit a video and still get away with, as long as everyone speaks in the video or has some kind of part in the video, then everyone will get credit. But if someone doesn't have any kind of input or whatever, we may do it that way where they get 0. So we'll see how it goes. I will update you on this. And the reason for this is because the way our classes are staggered for week 13. So that is something that we're going to think about. But going back to week 11, which is next week, remember that as these go on, assignment 2, part 2 is worth 10. Assignment 2, part 3, which is the final kind of version of your game on mobile, that's worth 20%. So not getting that done is a real... I don't recommend not getting that done. I think it's really important that you guys focus on this on the final portion for sure. Okay, because this is a big chunk of your code and a big chunk of your assignment that's due. So please look at the requirements for that as we go forward. Okay, so that is our course outline, and I want to go into starting our project. So for today, so let's get going on that. And again, if you go up online, you will see that I've just recently pushed up the Lab 10 starter. So that's where we're going to start from, which is really Lab 9. Lab 9 from before. Let's go back one step. So that's over here, where we are Lab 9A. And I'm just going to download that myself. So I'm going to kind of click on this and go through that whole process again, just to show you. Now, I know there's some people who are having a real challenge producing their lab on even the emulator, or even on their device, and that's because of the way their Android has been configured, Java and Android and all that stuff, and that can be a real challenge. Again, I don't have you in front of me where I can fix you, and even sometimes when I do have you, if I take over your machine and try it that way, sometimes that's not successful either. And the reason for that is because of your configuration. It's usually you. It's not normally me. That's the problem. Your version of the machine. It could be the way you virtualize. There's like a ton of different things that can cause a problem. Normally, it's something to do with the way you've installed Java in the past, and your antivirus. Those are the two main things. But sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's far deeper than that, where you have to do a kind of a machine reinstallation. And I think that's way out of scope for what we need to do here. So that's why, for the labs, even though I say, I want you guys to go on the simulator or on the machine, if you can't do it, but if you try the lab out and you make it work in the editor, I'm fine with it. I'll still give you the marks for the lab. And I think it's just to be fair with everybody, because I know people are have different configurations. We're working remotely. I think these are, considerations for us this semester, especially in, as we're rounding out. We're in the kind of the latter half. I would hope maybe the latter quarter of or latter half of COVID. And so because of that, we're remote, and I've got to give some consideration to everybody to make sure that you guys have as much support as possible. I don't want you guys to suffer, in this course, that's for sure. And that's why I've got to give you guys some flexibility. So it's okay, is what I'm saying. It's okay if you guys, for the most part, if you hand in your lab and your lab is not quite working on the simulator or on the device, it's okay. I'm still going to give you your lab marks if you try. Okay? If, however, I see no effort, then again, there's not much I can do with zero effort. No effort given, no marks given is the way I kind of am. But most people do something. I think there's a lot of you who really tried hard this semester, and I'm going to reward you with good marks. That's how it is. So if you trust me, I don't normally try and make it difficult on anybody. If you do what I've asked you to do, you're going to get your marks, and it's going to be great. All right, so we're just kind of in the first process of making my GitHub repository. So I'm going to do a git init, and we'll do git add dot and git commit -m, and then we're going to get into initial commit. There we go. Okay, so that we've got that. And what I also want to do now, because I've created a version that is the final version, I'm going to make this version our final. So I'm going to grab all these things and then right click here and go. And that should do everything we need to get you going on lab 10. Okay. Any questions before we begin lab 10, as we're waiting for things to push up on GitHub for the people that are here, or even the people that are on YouTube? Anybody that can come across, I will try and do my best to answer your questions. All right, I don't see a question, so hopefully we'll just continue. And then if you do have something, please interrupt me, and then I'll do my best to answer your questions. Okay, we don't need Oculus up. Let's close that down. I was working on a bit of a VR app before this, which was kind of interesting. Made some good headway. All right, so let's go new. New. Add. I'm not going to start from scratch, that's for sure. Desktop, Centennial, and we're going to go into week 10 and select. And that'll give us a chance to start things over and get going. Let's do this thing. So with Unity, one of the things that I want you to know is we've been using Unity all semester. By now, week 10, you should be much more comfortable than you were at the beginning. There are a lot of jobs with Unity, and it's not just in the game sector. So if you're a non-game student, there's a great opportunity for you to use Unity for simulations and as well as serious games. And serious games are things like you want to create a gamified experience for a medical simulation, as an example, or something like that. And Unity is kind of the #1 game engine that people, academics, use across the world to create simulations for automotive, medical, engineering, nuclear science, and a bunch of other kinds of simulations. And why? We could create simulations, especially in VR and AR now as well. Great support for those kind of things, even not only natively, but also on the web, that we can use to to for people who cannot physically be somewhere. And now in the age of COVID, when we can't physically be in a location a lot of times because of the challenges around this, the pandemic and so on, then what Unity does is it gives a chance to, and systems like Unity and simulations gives a chance to visit a place virtually. So it's kind of really cool. All right, let's get back on track though, and let's do what we're talking about today. So today, again, we're going to open up our main scene. And just like we've done in the past, we're just going to go back here. I got to import TMP Essentials, Text Mesh Pro. And I want to push it immediately onto our device. Let's get that done. So I'm going to go to File and Build Settings, and I'm going to transfer over to Android. Now, if you can't do this, like I said earlier, it's okay. If you build it locally on your editor, I'm okay with that. As long as you use the Android device simulator, I think you're pretty good. So I'm going to switch platforms here to Android. And then meanwhile, while this is going, I'm going to kick up my LD player, and I'm also going to connect my other thing, my actual device. Like, remember, I was talking about that it's always good to test on a real device to make sure that things are good. Okay, now it tells me that there's a new version present, and forever and whatever. I think this is pretty good. I'll update this. LD player doesn't take a whole pile of time to update, so I think this is worthwhile. And the great thing about this is it gives you additional things. They fix some stuff a lot of times. One thing we want to do is we also want to use Visor. I'm using Visor for my actual device. So if I pull up my actual device here, we should see my device come up because I'm going to test on the real device as well as on my emulator. Okay, so that's something that I'm going to be doing here, and you can see that we've got several tests already underway, but we're going to use that as well. So that's something that we're going to do. So Visor as well as LD player when this is done uploading and updating. And it's probably going to close, and yeah, it did. And it's going to launch the new installations. Hopefully it's not going to mess too many things up. And again, guys, worst case scenario, when it comes to updating, I have to talk about this as well. Whenever we have a VM appliance, so a virtual machine appliance like this one, like LD Player, which has actually got a little of a, you're actually playing a virtual machine of an Android device, right? That's why it's called an appliance, right? In many ways, right? What we want to do is make sure it's kept up to date, and you want to make sure that when you load back up, that everything was working as it was before, right? So again, I'm fairly confident that there's not going to be any issues, but this is why we're doing the update. Okay, so yay, it looks pretty good. Still got my data, and one thing that we note is the configuration looks all the same, so that's important. All right, so we're good to go. Let's first deploy on our device, but first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my player settings and change my product name from 9A to 10A. Again, this is all prep for what we're doing today, so that's pretty good. Publishing settings, I'm not going to change. I know there's been an update for this as well. I'm going to go to resolution and presentation. Make sure that portrait and portrait upside down are unchecked, like we talked about before. And in other settings, again, we want to make sure that these are correct. So we want to make sure that this says 10A. API level 25, IL2 CPP, and a .NET 4 with a release and C++ compiler version. I'm only using ARM version 7 and no ARM 64 for this example. All right, so great. So these are all good settings for me, and I think I'm ready to build and run. And I'm going to choose my emulator first. It's always safer to go there. So I'm going to choose my emulator and go build and run. And that should do everything I need. I'm going to put this inside of the builds folder, again, just like we've done many times before. Now it should be old hat for you guys. It's not something that is new in any way. And that should generate all the things we need. Let's get going on this. Now, it might spark out while I'm doing the transferring, so bear with me. And if I do slow down in terms of the way it looks, it's totally fine. And we're almost there. You can see it takes quite a bit of time for the first build to happen, but a lot of times after this, it's an incremental build, and so it won't be as bad. Okay, here we go. Should work on the LD player now. Let's take a look and see what it looks like. Again, what we want to look at is functionality for us, right? Right? We want to look at functionality. We want to be able to look at, all this stuff. And one of the things we talked about was saving and loading and how that's broken, like I talked about before. So how is it broken? What's the problem with saving and loading? Well, let's suppose I save my scene here and I want this view. And then if I go back, so let's say I just take this off and I go somewhere else over here. And then I want to go and load my view again. So if I go load, well, notice what it did. It did a couple of weird things, right? So loading didn't quite do what I wanted it to do. And I'm paused, that's fine. But even when I'm not paused, I just wanted to point out to you that, here, let's just try this out again. So if I back out, and let's say, for example, I want to look in this direction, we had this problem before. I want to look in this direction, I want to save, right? Again, how do we know we're saved or not? Well, if we load, we shouldn't go anywhere, right? So if I go back and I move to some other spot and I go load, then we should be looking in the right direction. We're in the right spot. We're not looking in the right direction. So that's kind of one problem. That's a bit of a bug. And the other problem that's a bit of a bug is what happens if I close my game? So right now it's working, but what if I shut down my game? So I'm shutting down. And let's just put some of these in the garbage. So we have some older versions of the game. That's lesson 8A. We'll get rid of that. And we'll get rid of lesson 9. And we'll only have lesson 10 here. Okay, so this is this one. So let's see how this works if I launch it again. So if I launch the game again, this is like if I shut down the game or shut down my device and I press load, does it remember? And the answer is it does not. It does not remember in any way. It remembers my last save position, right? So example, it didn't remember that I had to go way over here. Okay, let's say, for example, I want to go over here and save my game. So I click save, right? And this guy's going to kill me or whatever, but then I press load. It remembers where I am, right? But if I was to kind of go and get away from this guy, right? So let's say I want to get away, right? So I'm getting away from him. And if I load again, if I press load, right? And again, take a look. I'm not in the right spot, right? I'm not in the right spot at all. In fact, I'm in a weird spot, in a different spot, right? So this is an issue, and why this is happening is a couple reasons that this is going on. Let's talk about this to fix the problem. So let's get the loading and saving going for a second. And if I look at my scripts, and by the way, this is the first thing that I want to do. I talked about I want to fix saving and loading, which is what we're working on right now. Okay, so we're going to fix this part. So let's take a look at that script and see what's going on. So if I look at the where I do my behavior, it's all in my control panel. So my control panel right now, you got to talk about this a little bit and what it does exactly, right? So right now, the way we're doing our saving and loading, right? We have on load button pressed and on save button pressed, where we save our transform. And our transform information is not saving out the proper way because we're not really taking care of, even though my transform is an entire transform, you know, what I found is that saving the whole thing out doesn't save everything. In fact, it doesn't know what this transform is. So that's one. And if I go back to my the little script I made, which is my under data, I have this scene data SO. Notice that I have right now player position and player health. We want to also save a public quaternion. That's what it is, a quaternion that is player rotation, because that's one thing. We don't save player rotation. We're going to do it now. All right, so here's my player rotation this time around. Okay, so we kind of didn't cover this last time. So that's one thing that's changed, right? And what I need to do is, if I look at my object that's been created by, which is main scene data now has not just player position, but also player rotation with a quaternion, okay? So that's something to note. So when I load, I've got to save individual stuff and load individual things, okay? That's what I got to do. So by the way, let's move from this view. Let's move away to the simulator view so we see what the simulator looks like, and we should move to a Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, and I want to move the safe area so it looks like this. Again, all the same kind of stuff that we did last day with a bit of enhancements. All right, so this is our object now is not just player position for saving, but also player rotation. We want this as well. And what we need to do is, in our control panel, we don't just want player position saved or loaded. We want player rotation saved and loaded. So let's do that. So we'll say something like scene data dot player rotation is equal to player dot transform dot rotation, which is in fact a it is a quaternion. Guys, I have to just pause 1 sec. I'll be right back. I'm so sorry. I'm speaking. Okay, guys, sorry about that. Some minor issues. Let's get going on this. All right, back we are. Okay, so yeah, so what I was saying was we're saving both rotation and position now, not just position. And now when we load, we also have to load the rotation as well. So player dot transform dot rotation, and that's equal to our scene data that we saved, and then player rotation. That's what we're going to do. So it's quaternion to quaternion, and quaternion, remember, it's a four-dimensional vector in some ways, right? Where we have x, y, z, and w components. So that's how it works. And this might seem okay, and let's see what happens now when we build and run, right? So we should be able to save not just position, but also rotation. Let's do that. So we'll go file, save, file, save project, and then we'll do a build and run on the emulator. Again, we want to always build on the emulator first, test there, see what it looks like, and then come back. And this is going to take care of the first problem, which is it's not saving our rotation. Okay, that's the first problem. And then the second problem is, well, it's not saving between loads, which is something we have to take care of as well, right? Because if we don't do this right, then bad things will happen. Okay, so let's talk about that. And it's an incremental build, so it shouldn't take as long as last time. That's kind of the main thing around this. And we should be running now. Okay, cool. So there it is. So now we can see that when this runs, and if I back up, and let's say, for example, I want to save not just my rotation, my position, but also my rotation. I want to save this rotation, this view here. So I want to go to my information and save. And let's say, for example, I go back to someplace else. I go over here someplace, and I want to load. Now I should be able to flash back to that location and orientation, which is good. This is what we want. But there's still a problem that if I close my device, or my device turns off, or whatever, and I launch my app again tomorrow, let's say, or the next day, and if I go to load my game, so load, then I'm not in the right spot. And why is that? Because what happens is with what we have right now, which is using scriptable objects work great and very quickly in real time, right? So at runtime. So you can save and load multiple times as long as your app is running and it's, let's say, in the background, you'll have persistency, right? The biggest problem is when you turn your device off, or let's say you just shut the game down, like you stop the game. That is a problem, and you won't be able to recover your data. So can you imagine? You select things like options, your option screen. You select a color option. You select sensitivity options, and you go through all these different option changes that you ask your user to go through, and then you save the options in a scriptable object. And then what ends up happening is when you try and load it again, it doesn't work. And not only does it work, but it forgets everything and you're back to defaults. That would be very frustrating for a user. So how do you overcome this problem? Well, let's go back to code a little bit, and we'll talk about something called player preferences. So player preferences, I'm just going to go to the reference for this in Unity. If you go to player prefs in Unity, right, that's what it's called, player preferences. Player preferences it actually stores, it's not the player, but actually stores the view, the player itself, with Android or iOS or whatever, between loads. So there's several different things that you can do. One of them is you can serialize as a string. You can check to see if the preference has a key. Think about the preferences as a big dictionary, right? That's what they are. And what you can do is you can get string and set string if you want to set objects like this. And then, of course, what you can do is you can get float and set float if you want to set floating point variables or integers. That's okay. But what if you have a bigger variable? Well, what we need is something to get to JSON and from JSON. So let's do that. So if I say something like Unity to JSON, then you notice that what I can do is I can take an object and I can convert it to a string. That's what it returns, right? So public static, it's a JSON utility to JSON, and it kind of converts everything to a JSON string, and you can prettify it as well as you want, right? So it's a string, right? So it says returns a string and the object's data in JSON format. Okay, that's great. And this way I can save all kinds of data all at once. Wonderful. What about loading back in from JSON? So if I go something like Unity from JSON, right? And if you look at that, then there's JSON serialization, and you can actually go back out from JSON. And the way to do that is, so whatever my JSON utility is to JSON, and when I come back out, I got to specify the class as a shape when I come back out. So I go from JSON. Okay, this is actually a really good way of doing stuff, because if you think about it, I can save something as a string as per my player preferences. So there's my player preferences. I can save it out as a string. So I can set string and I can get string. And when I get string, it'll come back in as a string, and then I'll convert it into JSON, and then it'll incorporate everything into the class. This is the way we should probably do it. So let's think about when we're going to do it now. So this is how we have an idea of how we're going to do it. We can also do it individually. So I can also save things like booleans, and I can save primitives. If you notice, it allows me to save an integer, a float, or a string as primitives, right? But a string gives us way more power, that we can save stuff out. I'm not sure if there is a limit how long the string can be, but I think it's pretty big. So let's take a look and see how that works. So let's do this. So what I want to do is I want to save the health data. That's definitely what I want to save. So I want to save the health data and the position and the rotation. Position is a vector 3, which is 3 floats, and quaternion is 4 floats, right? That's what these two things are. So there's 7 floats. There's 8 pieces of information that I can save, and I can save each individual piece separately and load it up separately. Or what I can do is I can save it as a JSON object. So let's try this out. So if I say something like, I want to get my scene data, right, which is my data, right, and I want to go. And what I want to do is I want to use the JSON utility. So JSON utility dot, and I want to go to JSON, and I want to cast my object that I want to go, which is my scene data itself, right? There's my scene data. I want to cast it to string, right? So that's what this does. So let's see what that looks like when I save my stuff. So I want to debug.log. Let's see what that looks like if I go to my JSON utility dot to JSON. Wow, this is really messed up. My code hinting is terrible. All right, and let's see what happens when I do one more. When I do that, what does it look like for the string when I go and run this code? So if I go back to this, and I'm going to run it here in the editor now, just to get some information, because we won't get our debug.logs anywhere else. All right, so I'll run it and I'll open it up, and then I'll click save. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Oh, let me just pause the game so I don't get I don't get bothered by anybody. But if you notice, what I get is player position. I get a JSON object. That's what this looks like, right? So, and this is great. Player position, la la la, and it tells me about my X, Y, and Z position, plus my player rotation, which is X, Y, Z, and W, as well as my player health as 100. Okay, so that is my JSON object. Okay, so we know that works. That's great. That's actually fantastic. That it allows that. Why is it doing this? That's fantastic that it allows that to happen, right? Because that's what we want. We want the object to be come out this way, right? But we want it to persist between loads. So now we need to load it back in. So how does that look? So if I go back to the code, what I want is I want to take this JSON object, that's a string now, and convert it into a string. So I'm going to say something like player prefs dot toString. set string, and I want to set this object here, right, as a string. So I want to convert it, I want to set this object, and it says there's a couple things for the string. One thing is the string key, and the other one is the string value. So this is the string value. We need a string key, and we're going to say something like player data. So player data will be the string key, right? This is the string value. So we save player data on save button pressed. And then what we're going to do is we're going to load it in by converting it back over. So that's how we use it. You say player preferences. So this is save our data to player preferences dictionary. That's what it is. It's almost like or slash DB, a database, right? That's what it does. It's like kind of a local database in our machine. And then we're going to load it back in again. So we don't want to do it here. We want to do it up here. So we want to say something like, okay, so now we want to load it back in. So player preferences dot get string, and we want to load it back by the string ID, which is player data. So that's where it gets stored. This is where it comes back in as a string. So now we have a string, and we want to use our JSON utility. I'm going to say JSON utility dot from JSON, right? And what we want to do is we want to convert it. Look at the options that you have. So if I go from JSON like this, it tells me what kind of class is it going to go back into. We know it's going to be scene data SO. That is the type that we're going to go back into, right? So scene data SO is the type, the class that we're going to come back into. And then what we want to do is we want to take the object that we're going to put in there as a string. So we grab all this stuff, cut it, put it inside there, and then what we'll get is a object that comes out. But what this returns is a scene data SO. That's what it comes out. So what we need to do is we have to say something like scene data is equal to this. And that's what, so this is kind of deserialize data from player preferences. That's what it does. It converts it back into a type of object that comes back inbound. And then this is, we don't just save, but we also serialize and save our data to player preferences. That's what we're doing. And then we're deserializing and loading our data from player preferences. That's what's happening. So this is on load button press. We load our data and then we save our data here. Now we would do this. We could do this every single time if you want. But I think the really cool thing about loading our data is I don't think we need to load our data every single time. I don't think it's required. As long as we save our data every single time, and between loads during real time, we're doing this, this is okay. So we probably only need to do this once. That's like when the game starts. So this is when we would do it up here. We kind of come up to our start function. And after we have our player data, we've got our player data, which is the player data SO, and so on. What we want to do is we want to do this. We want to kind of deserialize our data when we come up on start. The other thing to do is we can do it on awake. Sometimes what we want to do is we want to use the awake lifecycle function, which kind of triggers before start, before all this other stuff comes in, like the pausable player behavior, camera controller, and all this other stuff. We can do this stuff on awake. So this is like before our app even starts rendering, we can load our data from our scene data from our player preferences. That's something that we can do there, right? So on awake. We don't need this anymore. Well, actually, we'll come back to this. We'll have another thing there. But that is pretty good, right? So that kind of saves it and loads it. We only load it once. Right, we only load the actual stuff from player preferences once, but we want to probably save every single time. And the reason why we want to save every time is because we want to make sure it saves to our, when we click save, it's going to save to our preferences and to our local real-time data. Real-time, we're going to load it every time I press the load button. But we're only going to save it once officially, or load it once officially. Okay, so let's do this again. Let's see how this works. So I'm going to come back here. Let's try it first on the local device, on the editor. Now this is different, and it may work differently than in the emulator. So if I run this now, and I want to back out, first I want to check to see if there's basic functionality. Ooh, woohoo. I want to save my, sorry, really sensitive because it's a different control set. Okay, so there, and let's move up a little bit, and I want to save this view right here. So I want to go here and save. And then it says null reference error. What are you thinking, Tom? You know, you've got a problem. And what it says is, it says that scene data, player position, player transform position, doesn't know what I'm saying. Why is that? Well, we've made some changes. So let's review some of those things. So where is that null reference? It's here. When I try and save my player position, right? Scene data, save my player position. Why is that? Right? So let's take a look at what we have in my control panel. So again, going back to the canvas, and I'm going to go to control panel and scroll down, and what the heck? What happened to my my player data? It's right here, right? So main scene data SO, that looks okay, and there's my game state panel. So what happened? Why is it saying that my when I'm pressing my save button, that it doesn't understand what the heck I'm talking about when it comes to my player scene data player position is equal to player transformed position? Why is that? Where is my player inbound? So this is where my scene data is coming in. Here's my player, and my scene data is up here. And this is where sometimes we have to really think about this twice. So maybe we'll take this and we'll put this under here when we have some player information. Sorry, I'm just trying to rethink about this again, make sure that this is all good, because that should work now. Order of operations, right? Let's try this one more time, and let's see how this goes. So again, what we want to do is we want to clear the situation here. So let's clear this up, and let's try it again. And again, a couple things. Let's try and load. So if I go load, that worked, right? It says character controller. Here's something else that happened. Character controller move called on inactive controller. What does that mean? On inactive controller. So this is something. Look what's happened here. So if I pause, it's like I am completely inactive, but that something's messed up, right? Because look, this should definitely be able to move now, but somehow my player is not moving. And one thing that we have at the top is that we have a null reference exception that says, again, object reference not set to an instance of an object. And where we're looking to see our, we want to get a reference to our player transform dot position, and that is an issue. And the way we're getting our player, again, just to recount here, we're finding the player in the scenes. We're saying player, find object of type player behavior. And we're looking here and we're trying to find an object of type. So we're looking to the player and we'll say, here's player. And, player has our player behavior, right? So where is our player behavior? It's right here. Object of type player behavior is here. So what about our control panel? So in our control panel, it's saying, okay, well, here's our player behavior. Here it is. Here's our camera. Here's our pausable. And our scene data. Oh, man, look at that scene data. That scene data is gone. It's gone. So on the local player, that's a problem. Why? Because I'm trying to load something that doesn't exist. Local player doesn't have a player preferences. So testing it locally, it's a problem, right? Because look, if I run it again, if I just start running without loading anything, look, my scene data is gone. See that? So it doesn't come from anywhere. I don't have a piece of data that I can load from. And that's an issue because I don't have player preferences locally. Now I can, for now, I can put this in here just to make sure I can move. So this is me moving around, right? And then if I save, let's see if I can save the player preferences for a second. If I go to there and I go to save, right? So I save the player preferences. Now we have maybe player preferences here for the first time, right? Because we never had it before. That's an issue because I'm doing it on load. I'm trying to load something that doesn't exist, and you know, if it doesn't exist yet, then it's going to give me a problem, and that's what it did just now. All right, so it kind of loaded and it wasn't there, it didn't exist, and then I had a problem. Okay, so that's one. So now that I've saved it, let's see if I can load it and if it works locally. So if I press play, take a look over here. Do I get player preferences now? Okay, so now it seems that I do have player preferences, but I get this argument exception that says cannot deserialize JSON to a new instance of type scene data SO. So these are all issues that we're finding out, right? Because we're trying to serialize and deserialize and all kinds of lovely stuff that we're trying to do. Let's see how that works. So if I go back to here, it says I cannot deserialize. That's what it says. Cannot deserialize into something of type scene data.so because my scene data, the stuff that I'm trying to save or load from JSON, what is it? So let's see what I'm getting. And the way to do that is if I do this part first before I set my scene data up and then print it out. Let's do that in 2 steps. So we'll say something like, all right, so we'll say something like var scene data, this is testing, scene data string is equal to, we'll say scene data JSON string. That's what it is, scene data JSON string. That's equal to all of this. And then what we want to do is, sorry, that is not that. Hold on a second here. Put that back. I meant this part. That's the JSON string. And we'll put down JSON string, scene data JSON string in there, right? So now let's see, we have 2 steps now. So what I can do is I can always go here and test. I can say, okay, debug.log. What am I getting from scene data JSON string? Because what if I get nothing locally? Like it's not inbound, it's not coming inbound from player data, right? So let's see what that looks like. So again, and I'm just showing you the problems with this system, right? So run, and okay, so here's something we get. Look, we actually get back some data. We got some stuff locally, even though we said load, it loads back player position, X, Y, Z, and player rotation, X, Y, Z, W, and player health of 100. So we actually loaded it back in. But when we try and cast it as, we say, cannot deserialize JSON to new instance of type scene data SO. We're trying to create a type here, right? And if we look online, so this is just, I'm just telling you how this works, right? So here's the type. It says supported types. JSON API supports any mono-behavior subclass, scriptable object subclass, that's good, or plain subclass, plain class or struct with the serializable attribute. So this is an important piece. So it's something serializable. Let's make sure our thing is serializable as well. So I'm going to go up here, even though it's this, I'm going to make this serializable just by putting a system.serializable thing here. And let's see what happens. Will it accept it? System.serializable. And it does, right? So this makes our class serializable. We're just kind of telling it that this is serialized. So player position, player rotation, player health, and we're saving this as a scriptable object type. So we should be able to do this. It's important to see the supported types. So you can also deserialize JSON data over an existing object, which overwrites any existing one by doing something that looks like this. JSON utility from JSON overwrite the JSON that I get back and my object, which is what I want to do. Otherwise, it won't read in properly. So this is kind of what I'm looking for, to overwrite. So let's do this little utility, and that might fix our issue. So again, I'm going back to here. And I'm saying that my JSON and my object is something that I want to write. So let's get that data. So remember, JSON, it says it has to be a string of type JSON. So that's this. So JSON string. And then my object is what I'm serializing to, which is my scene data as so. That's this thing. But it's an object, so it's scene data. All right, so scene data is something that I'm going to overwrite, and it does it in one. What does this return? It returns void. So instead of doing it this way, where we actually say scene data is equal to this, we use JSON overwrite whatever's already there with our own data. Let's see if this works a little differently, because we're able to serialize, right? Let's see if this works better. Okay, so we're going to go back and running it, and then get into that state again. And again, this is all in pursuit of persistent data between loads, not just persistent data in real time. So now we loaded it, and we seem to have OK. We're said to be OK. Let's see if that works now. If I go here and load, hey, look at that, it remembered. And it remembered across builds. Okay, let me look around here and switch our, we'll switch our orientation to something else. If I can do that, something like this, and maybe move our thing like this. We can see the little man here, and let's go to save. And now we're serializing out the JSON. And now let's shut our app down, and then we'll run it again, and we'll load between app loads. We'll load, and now we should see that little guy. Okay, so this is a good test. It looks like we're serializing and deserializing properly. So going back to our code, we don't need this anymore. And let's test it now on a actual device. All right, so again, serializing is done at the save button, where we save everything and convert it to JSON, and then deserializing is done on the way back out when we deserialize from JSON and overwrite our JSON object. That's the problem that we had. All right, so that's good. And we just broke it down into 2 lines, but you can actually put all this into here if you really wanted to. I just broke it down 2 lines for testing. All right, so let's try it now again, and we'll try it inside our emulator. So again, I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go Build and Run, and let's see how that works on the emulator between loads now. And then we would have solved our issue. And we've saved quite a bit of data, and we don't have to do it individually. That's a real pain if I have to go through one thing at a time. And we don't have to do that. We can use data serialization, JSON serialization. JSON is a great data format. We use it everywhere on the web. And there's no better place to do it than here, right? So now, how does this work on WebGL? It does work as well. It does work as well, but be aware that there are some limitations on what you can do on the web. Okay, so let's try it first on our emulator, and let's see what this looks like. So again, we saved our data. I will load my data. And we can see that we're certainly in that position. That's okay. That doesn't prove anything, though. So let's move our position completely, and we'll look in a different location, somewhere out in no man's land. We'll look kind of the other way around, and we'll see our little guy way over there. There he is. That's our little guy there, and we're way out here now. And we'll click on Save, and now we'll just cancel our app. So hey, we're gone, and we'll relaunch it. So we'll relaunch it, and when we relaunch in our standard position. But I want to say I want to load, and now, oh man, what happened? How come it didn't save like we expected it to save? It saved here. This is during kind of runtime, but it didn't load, right? It didn't load what we wanted to on in terms of things. The test. If it doesn't do it here, well then it's not going to do it anywhere else, right? And that's kind of an issue. So here I want to do this. So I want to go here and save, and that again, we're not getting any feedback that things are successful or anything like that. We just assume that it's saving, and if I load, it loads now, same place. So if I actually do it in real time, and if I click load, then it's okay, right? But if I close this app down and load it again and click load, it goes to the other side. You'll see why in a second. It'll go here, which is the wrong place. So that seems to me that the player preferences save didn't work. Okay, I'm just, again, pointing this out to you so you understand the complexities of this whole thing. Going back, let's go to this. So on start, the app started up. It tried to load from player data, get string, scene data, and it's going to overwrite JSON, right? So again, what we can do is it's trying to override from an object, which is scene data. That's what's happening. Okay, and here it's saving to an object called string data, saving out to a scene locally. So this is what's doing it here, and then it's loading it back up over there, but it doesn't seem to be working properly. Set string and get string. So this is get string, player data. We know it's saving and loading, it's just not transferring. So it's not actually doing anything to our player preferences, or it's not, this line here isn't any good. Let's try it the other way around, but only on the emulator and see what happens. So, oh wait, did I? Yeah, I did. Let's try the other way around. So if I said something like scene data SO, scene data is equal to, like we did before, a JSON utility dot from JSON, and we want to cast it as scene data SO, and we want to pass in the scene data object. Again, it works differently. It might work differently on the editor than it does locally, right, or on the device, right? So let's try it this way and see if this even works or errors out. Maybe it even stops our program from running. Let's see what happens if we did it this way. Okay, and then we'll go back to the other stuff. So go back, and then we'll try it. So we'll say File, Build, and Run. It's one thing that's changed, like one line really. So this should be an incremental build, should be fairly fast. Let's see. But again, if this doesn't work on our emulator, it's probably not going to work on our regular device, right? But this is the idea behind it, trying to save locally and load remotely. All right, let's see if this is going to work. Worst case, what do? We can go back into individually saving each piece of data, which will definitely work. But that's a real pain if I have to save reams of data, you know, kind of stuff. That's, you know, terribly inefficient. All right, so again, what we want to do is load up our data. So I go here and load. Okay, now that is a problem. So right there, I know I have an issue, right? Because I'm dead, I'm frozen. Frozen means, guess what? That error that we had locally on our machine is happening here. That's why this thing is not working, because we have a build error. And it's not crashing us. It's not enough to crash us, but it's enough to stop us. So going back to the drawing board, the other way we did it, which is this way, is definitely the way that'll stop stuff from happening. It's just not serializing properly. So not sure if it's the serialization version or the deserialization path that's having a problem. We don't know. Let's see if we can serialize individually. So this is what we would like to do. So what we would like to do is this stuff. This is what we need to do. What we might need to do is this. So let's just comment this out. And what we might need to do is something else. We might say something like, okay, I want to save and load data now. I have I have a bunch of floats that I want to load back in, right? And I have one integer, right? So that's what I want to load and save. So then what I want to say is when I save stuff, which is down here, instead of saving it as a, this is what we would like to do. Here's what we may have to do, because depending on your build, and this might be just one of those builds, we might want to say when I save my data, I want to say that player prefs dot set float And I want to set the float, which is a string key, which is my player transform x, right? And then that string key is going to be overwritten as an example, and by some kind of floating point value, which is my player or scene data. Let's take it right from scene data. Scene data dot player position dot x. So this is the surefire way it'll work. It's less long and unusually terrible. Right? I can do this. I can say that we have a bunch of keys in our dictionary, right? So this is the other way to do it. And then we could do the same thing with quaternions. We'd say player prefs dot set float, and we'll say that player rotation x, and then we'll say scene data dot player rotation dot x. So that's a different thing. It's a quaternion piece of data. And then we'll say the same thing goes 1, 2, 3. And this will be y. And this will be z. And this will be w, because w component is the other value of a quaternion, right, that we don't have in a regular three-dimensional value, right? So there's a quaternion. And the last one that we need is player preferences dot set int, which we want to call player health. Again, this is not terribly bad. It's not my preference. Player health is what we want, which is an integer. So this saves it out. This is what we may have to do, long form, as opposed to using one little statement. We do all this. But the good thing about this is we serialized everything individually as floats, not as strings. Now, when we come back inbound, then we can do the same thing. We can deserialize out the same way. I'm just going to grab this this line. We'll revamp it a little bit. The other way around. So we could do it long form, where we say instead of set float, we can use get float. So let's change that first. So get float. And this will be get int. And then what we can do with these is we can take this part and we can put it here, and we can say that this is equal to this. We can say that we get our data from the int. That will definitely work, right? And we'll do the same thing with this part. So we'll grab this and we'll put it here, and we'll do this, right? And we'll do the same thing with the other ones. So just bear with me while we do that. And I'll just do them all at once, and then I'll add all the syntax in afterwards, because it's far easier to do this than to do it all one at a time. This way I can go through and manage all the errors all together at once, and it's not a big issue, right? So that's pretty cool. And if I have a problem like I caused here, I find it and I can fix it, because you can see that would be something that looks like this. So let's just put all the equal signs in there now. Again, this is me being really lazy. I don't want to type anything, and otherwise I could just spend time typing all this out. But I mean, you can see how tedious this would be if you had lots of data. This is only just player data. Now, what you may want to do, like we said last time, is split this up over multiple files, because once we split this up over multiple files, like player data, enemy data, and so on, then it'll be a lot easier to consume. Okay, so that is pretty good. That is definitely going to work now. Let's try this out. Let's push this out to our code, and let's see what happens. So again, I'll say something like file, build and run, and then hopefully we'll get the right data coming inbound when we save it first time. All right, so let's see how that looks. Now remember, there is already a main scene data SO. There's always going to be that. But what happens is we haven't saved out those, we've never saved anything out to the files in the first place. That's the biggest problem we have. We've never done that. So whenever we want to load something, we need some data to save first, right? Just putting it out there. So one thing is we don't have a player preferences dictionary right now. They're going to come in empty. So let's save something first before we load something. It's going to give us a bit of an error, and I don't care. One thing that we can also do is we can pre-populate the player preferences with something ahead of time, right? Locally, right, before we put it out. That's kind of a trick we would use too, right? So again, one thing to note is that did that crash my LD player? No, here it is. So here I want to click on save, right? And let's crash, and start over again, and then we'll just like, it won't give us an error now. Okay, so now that we've saved, we'll kind of go over here, we'll look around over there, and then we'll say, okay, I want this angle, and I want to go here and save. Then I want to close this off and reload. And then now it'll start us off nicely. There shouldn't be an issue moving. And if I go to load, that didn't quite work, did it? That is really bizarre. Kind of worked before for me. Something is not right. What is not right, Tom? It's loading and saving from player prefs. I had this working tickety-boo before, so I'm not sure why it's doing this right now, but it's not. Oh yeah, this is broken too. Let's see. So over here, and if I click save, and then I move somewhere else, and then I click load, it's going to take me back to, so locally, real time, it works. Yes, nice, nice. And if I close it but rerun it, this should also work. But it seems as if we have a problem with the loading part. Yeah, look at that. That is really bizarre and strange. Why is that? So let's see what that is. What's going on there? So loading loads from this player controller enabled is equal to say scene data, player position, and player rotation, scene data, player health. Yeah, that should totally work from thing. I guess we're going to have to try this every single time, but that may really defeats the purpose of all this, right? Doesn't it? So let's just do this, and let's make it a couple of, one thing I can do is make a couple of functions here. So one function I can say is, we'll make this public, and we'll say void save to player prefs. Oops. And we'll have another one, public void load from player prefs. Right? And we'll take this part, just so that we have a single responsibility. We take all this part and cut it and put it here. Oh, and put it here. And we'll take the loading part, this part right here, cut it, and put it into here. This part. So load and save. And here what we'll do is, whenever we save, we'll save to player prefs, and whenever we load, we'll load from player prefs. Load, actually, and we'll do it here. Load from player prefs. Okay, load and save. We have data to load and save, and then just to make sure, on start, really we'll have to load from player prefs, which is weird that it wouldn't do that. Okay, let's try it again. So save, and we'll run locally. We'll run locally, and let's try it locally first. So again, if I was to save, that's fine. And then if I run way over here, would it break? No, just running backwards. Run over here and look around over here. There, you can see that little guy there. A little bit closer. Here we go. See that little guy? So that's a new setting. And we'll save. Then we'll close it down. And then we'll load it up. And then this should remember where we're looking. Yeah, that's worked. That totally worked between saves. Okay, so locally it worked. Let's see what it looks like if I build and run. Build and run. And I'm building to my emulator, so that way I can see what that looks like. Okay, sorry, I had to deal with this because I know I had a question. One of the students, one of you guys came to me and said, like, Prof, we've tried it and it doesn't work on thing, and it's because we did it with scriptable objects, but we didn't do the second part, which is player preferences. But the other part worked for me before with to JSON and from JSON. It's just not working today for some reason. It doesn't matter. I might be missing something. And I'm not really that concerned. We'll fix it another time. All right, so yeah, loading and saving, and we're running it on the device, on the emulator. And if I go to load, I should see it's not even saving my local stuff. It's interesting. I even get to 0 health. It's not interesting. That's fine. So what if I was to save it somewhere else? So let's say if I save it locally. So I want to say, let's move this and save it locally. And then if I go way back here and I go to load, it should teleport me back, right? If I look away and I go to load, it should reorient me. Yep, that's all good. And if I close this down and start this up, what it should do is it should load me up again in the same spot that it had me before. That's it. Perfect. And that's how it should work. So that is a trick, my friends. All right, so that is loading and saving in a nutshell, and that's loading between saves. Let's put that up on GitHub. So file, save project, and we'll exit. Definitely the long way to do it. I'm not happy with it. There's that using JSON objects is the way to go. It's just not seem to be working for me today, and that's fine. But again, my motto is make it work, right? Make it work. All right, so that's good. Let's go to here. Now we close down Unity. So I'll say git add git commit -m, and I'll say fixed loading, saving between app loads, git push. Because that's really that was a problem. We have to fix that problem before we move on. All right, so that is that. Any questions around whether it's online on YouTube or locally around loading and saving data? I think we've kind of reviewed that a couple times now, and I went over the details of player preferences, which is like a dictionary, so that should be a little bit clearer for you than what we had before. By the way, the player preferences, what you should do is you should definitely use it for everything. Switching out keys, selecting options, saving data, all kinds of little things you can use it for. I recommend that you use it as a big dictionary as opposed to something that we're doing here. Okay, so this is good. We have a good place to start. Now let's go back to the scene and do some procedural generation. So far what we've been doing is we're saying, okay, look, I've got this object, this stuff here, and I've got these tiles. Right, so the first type of way I want to do it is let's rejig our scene now. So I've got my enemies. These are enemies, and each of these enemies is a prefab. So we can always bring these back. Let's just get rid of them. So goodbye enemies. And I got my enemies thing, and I want to get rid of this plane. So goodbye ground. All right, and also, notice what I'm doing here is in I want to be able to pre-generate my level randomly. Now I have a bunch of things here. I have tiles, and I have tile 1, tile 2, and everything else, right? And notice how they're all standing up straight, which is good. This is a really good thing, right? So I got tiles that stand up, and there's 2 different tiles, tile 1 and tile 2. Let's get rid of all the tiles in my scene. So here's all my tiles gone, as well as this little pillar, because we don't care about the pillars right now. So goodbye pillars, right? And then once I have all of this, I have nothing. You're like, wait, Tom, but there's nothing here anymore. We're going to generate it using a game controller. So we have a game controller, and our game controller takes care of our soundtrack, right? That's where our soundtrack is going to be if we want to make that run all the time. But we can also create an area where tiles or the level gets generated in here. So let's rename tiles to level. And this is the type 1 type, which is in our PowerPoint presentation. I said there's 2 types, right? There's type 1, which is random map generation, which I'm going to do right now, and type 2, which is using Perlin noise. Okay, so we're going to get to type 1 first. Let's do type 1. So type 1 means I need a level script. So I have a bunch of stuff. I have a game controller right now, and the game controller, all it does is it creates a new scene with a button and blah, blah. But what I also want to do is I want to make a level controller. So create a new C# script called a level controller. Yeah, there's my level controller. And my level controller script, I want to pass into my level prefab, my level empty. That's all that is. So level controller, pass into that, right? And what I want to do is I want to think about how I'm going to code this thing, right? So I need some information. So I want to have some world information, almost like world properties. So I'm going to make a header, and I'm going to call it world properties, okay? And or world attributes. We could also call it world attributes. And what I want to have is 2 values for now. I want to have a public float, which is a width, and a public float, which is a height. So I have a world width and a world, actually it's not height, it would be length. Length times width, length. So how long it is and how wide, not a real height. I don't have a world height yet. And what I want to do is I want to get a number of tiles. So the tiles I'm getting, I want to load the tile type. I have 2 tiles, tile 1 and tile 2. So then those are the 2 tiles. So we'll make a tile array or a tile list. So a public list of game objects, right? And they're called tiles. The tile list. That's what they are. So tiles. And we can also call them tile types, right? Tile objects, call it whatever you like. Maybe tile objects might be better. Tile objects, right? And when we want to get that, we can do it by, I have tile objects. I can make a room for 2 or as many as I want. And I can go into our resources, prefabs, and grab tile 1 and grab tile 2 and put them in there. Tile 1 and tile 2. And what I want is a random number to generate which tile is going to come out on the screen depending on how the width and height. Right now we'll make it by default a width and a length. And maybe we want to say length times width, because usually we say length times width when it comes to area. And this will say, for this will be, instead of world attribute, we'll say world size, just to make it so it's a little bit more reasonable. So world size is length times width, and we have a 2 by 2 tile. So 4 tiles will generate. That's what we want. 2 tile objects, tile 1 and tile 2. And then the first one, right, make sure that they're going to appear in level underneath the level empty. That's where they're going to appear. All right, so how does that work? First of all, we have to decide which tiles we're going to make, right? When we kind of come up with this, we have tile objects, right? Those are our tile prefabs. That's what they really are, right? So these are tile prefabs. Let's refactor, rename. So I keep renaming this, but I want to make it so it's right. Tile prefabs. And let's do this again. So when I rename it, it'll kill this thing because it's a different name. So let's do that again. So 1, 2, and again, all I'm doing is taking tile 1 and tile 2, making it go there. There we go. All right, so now I have my tile prefabs, but I also want a some other things. Is I want a tile list. All the tiles. So it's going to be a public list of game objects, and we'll call these active tiles. Active tiles, so tiles in the game, right? That's what they are. Some But tile prefabs, tile 1 and tile 2, but the active tiles are going to be in a certain position and location, all that stuff. What I have is when I have length times width, I have the ability for me to create all the active tiles that I want. So what I want to do is I want to say something like 2 for loops. So, and I'll go by row X and then Y. So row column format or column row format. So for column, right? And column would be the x-axis, right? First, so that would be the width. Let's go back out and do that again. So that'll be the for width, right, is equal to less than the width number. So again, it's just to keep set. If I say width and width, that's not going to make any sense. So again, we may want to rename these things to tile width and tile length, and this will be tile width. And then inside that, what we're going to do is we're going to make another for loop, and we're going to say this is length is equal to tile length, okay? Width, X, length, Y, or Z actually. Y is up in Unity. All right, so that's how we're going to do it. Let's make sure that there's numbers there, because if there's no numbers here, that would be bad. And there wouldn't be any because I changed the names of the variables 2 by 2. And what I want to do is, this is how many tiles that are going to generate. So I want to grab a random tile from tile prefabs. That's what I want, a random tile from tile prefabs. Okay, cool. Let's do that. So we'll say, I want to get random range. I want to get something from a random range of, and it says, if I go integer, it's exclusive. So I got to go from 0 to 2. So 2 is exclusive, right? So it's not including that. And what I can say, instead of making it so it's hard-coded, I can say the tile prefabs dot size or count, right? As an example, that is how big it is, how many I have. I have 2, right? That's how many are going to go there. So that's the random range I'm going to get. And I'm going to get a number, an integer, between those two numbers, 0 and 1, right? 0 and 1. And what I'm going to say is, depending on what that is going to be the index, this will be the random tile index. So random tile index, right? It's going to be some random range between this and this. And I want to say that the new tile is going to be based on this tile. So I'm going to say that, okay, cool. I want to get the active tiles, add, right? And I want to add a new tile. So I want to say that tile prefabs, right? Actually, what we'll do is we'll generate a brand new tile. Let's do that first. We'll instantiate something. We'll say var new tile is equal to instantiate the tile, the active tile that I want. So tile prefabs, right? And then it'll be the random tile index, whatever I want. Okay, and then where I want it, it's going to be some kind of transform, right? So I'm going to say that we want some kind of new, actually we'll call this the random, or the position, which is going to be based on the X and Y axis, right? So we'll call this tile position. We don't have that yet. And then some kind of tile rotation, which we don't have that yet either. All right, so random tile, that's our random tile, right? That's what this new tile is. So new tile will be this random tile, random tile index, random tile position, random tile rotation. Random tile position, random tile rotation. All right, so those are the things we don't have yet. And we're going to take that random tile, we're going to add that into the active tiles list. Before we do that, we want to say that active tiles, the new random tile dot transform dot parent is equal to the parent of the level prefab, the level game object, right? So we're going to say that public game objects, we'll call it the level parent, right? The level parent is what we want, which is equal to level parents dot transform. Okay, so level parents, that is this. This is level parent, okay, right here. So we need to drag that in. So this is going to be the level parent, right? But we don't have random tile position or random tile rotation. We need those first. So we say that var random tile position, right? That's going to equal to a wherever I am width and width-wise. I'm going to start off with whatever the width is, right? And then I want to multiply it by, if the width is 0, I want to multiply by some kind of width. So it's going to be a new vector3 object, where I'm going to say the x-axis is going to be the width multiplied, right, by the tile width, right? And the tile width is going to be actual width and length of the tile. So that means that when we look at the tile itself, the position, it's 8 by 8. It's actually, this is bad. And 2, this one is 1 by 1. If I was to drag and drop this into here, and I drag and drop, and if you notice this is 0, 0, and if I drag and drop another one in there, let's drag another one in there, right? And if I was to place it next to each other, so if I said something like, okay, let's put them next to each other, they're about 16 apart, 16 units apart from each other. So that's something to note, that they're in increments of 16, okay? So we don't need those. But we know 16 by 16 is how big those tiles are, which is important. So multiplied by 16, so it'd be 0 at the beginning, 0, 0. Right? On the y-axis, it'll be 0, 0, because we're not going to go up anywhere right now. And then on the z-axis, it's going to be by length. So length, right, multiplied by 16. Okay, so that is going to be the random tile position. It's not really going to be random. It's going to build it actually by order. Ordered tile position, more like what it is. Okay, this is the ordered random tile rotation. Similar to that, I'm going to say random tile rotation, right? That's going to equal to some random numbers here. So we're going to say that I want a random number between 0 and 360 degrees, right? But I only want increments of 90. That's what I want. So really, I'm going to take how many increments of 90-degree turns can I make? How many times is 90 going to 360? Well, it's 90, 180, 270, 360. So really 4 different kinds of rotations, right? That's what I want. So I'm going to say I need a random range between, I'm putting it out here because I'm going to connect it together, between 0 and 4, but not including 4. So 0 and 5. So 0, 1, 2, 3. And actually what I want to do is between 1, so it's want to be 1 times, sorry, no, it's 0, 0, 0, 0. 0 and then 3 times 9. Yes, it is correct. 0 and 5, where 5 is not included. So it'll be 0 to 4. 4 times 9 is 0 to 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, where 0 is 0 degrees. 1 is 90 degrees. 2 is 180 degrees. 3 is 270. And there's no 4. It'll go back to 0, which is 360. So that is 0 to 360 degrees. That's what this is. Multiplied by 90 degrees. That's what that is going to give us. So that random range between these two numbers. Right? Now, if I made it an integer, this is going to return an integer, but I'm multiplying it by a float. I'm going to get some kind of odd numbers. And what I can do is I can make these integer numbers. But if I did that, then I would get other weird numbers, and I don't want that. That's why I'm okay with this, 0 to 4. All right, so then this is for each x, Y, and Z location kind of thing if I wanted to, but really I'm only rotating it across the Y axis. I'm not rotating it, spinning it across the X axis, right? So what it would look like is my random tile location, random tile rotation, right then, is a new, and I want to do a quaternion, but I want to do an Euler. Like I want to do Euler angles. That's what I want. I want to kind of convert to Euler, right? So it's a new Euler quaternion, right? So it's a new quaternion, and the quaternion is going to take, if you notice what a quaternion takes, it takes in X, Y, Z, and W, right? That's what it takes in. I'm not going to switch the W rotation, and the X and the Z are going to stay the same. So it's going to be 0.0 on this. And then it's going to be some rotation. Really what I want to do is I want to take this and I want to convert it to a random rotation, right? I can't just replace this by, you know, what I want it to do, because what I want to do is I want to take this quaternion Euler, and I want to take this quaternion Euler and put in X, Y, and Z, where X is 0.0, Y is the random tile rotation, and then Z is 0.0. That's what I really want to do. And I think that's just a better way of doing it than me trying to make a quaternion, right? So I can just do this, random range, 0 to 4 times 90, random rotation, right? This is going to give me a floating point number, whatever that's going to be, which I'm going to plug into this random tile rotation. It's going to create a new quaternion Euler, which is going to convert to a nice quaternion. It's going to give me a nice rotation in there. So that's what it's going to do. And it's going to make one for every single tile. It's going to add the tile in, it's going to attach to the parent, and let's try it with the settings that we have. There's not going to be any movement right now. There's no enemies, none of that stuff, just one thing at a time. So let's try the setup. So save, and we should be able to go back in here. And if I go back into level, you can see that I have the level parent, which is just myself. And if this is the case, instead of me dragging and dropping like that, what I can do is the level parent is this. I don't have this at all. I can just say that it's transform. So I can say this dot transform, just to be clear, right? Because this belongs to the level. So make this game object the level parent. That's what it is. Okay, so I can do that. No dragging and dropping required. And if I go back, you can see that I have a number of tiles, active tiles, no active tiles, but I should get a 2 by 2 tiles, so I should get 4 active tiles at the end in here. Let's try this out and see what happens. And sure enough, I do. I get 4 tiles right there. And notice that I reset myself. I actually fell the first time because of where my thing is. Let's take a look and see what it generated. It kind of generated everything except for this one weird one. What the hell happened there? That's weird, right? What did it do there? It got all of these, but when it came to this one, we had an issue. Well, remember, one of our tiles is broken. One of our tiles has a rotation of -90, right? That's what it is. And this tile has a rotation of 0. So when you have a broken tile like this, like that's incoming from Blender, what we can do with this one is we can make a new prefab. So let's bring this in, and we can add additional things in here. This is a prefab that is not, remember we talked about this before. I want to make sure that this is all zeroed out. This one is -90. Let's make sure it's exactly -90. And 888 is the scale. But what I want to do is I want to make so that it is, there's 2 tiles. So this is tile 1, let's call it a tile with no enemy, and tile 2 is a tile with enemy. We'll talk about tile with enemy in a second. So tile 1 which is this one, is tile no enemy. So let's just go and wrap it around a parent. So create empty parent. And we'll call this one tile no enemy. Tile no enemy. There's no enemy on this one. Okay? So no enemies are going to appear in this one. And then what I want to do is I want to create a new, make sure this is zeroed out. It's important. So reset. Tile no enemy. This is also 111 should also be totally reset to 000. Sorry, and make sure these are all reset values. These are all 000s. And then what I can do is I can save this as a prefab. So save it. Tile no enemy. Then I can make tile with enemy. I don't have an enemy yet, but I put one in there. So I'll say, here's tile 2. It's already good. Bring it into the scene, and then we'll make this one tile with enemy. So we'll kind of make a new empty parent. Here's my game object. And then we'll say that this is tile with enemy. Tile with enemy. Okay. Right now, there's no enemy on there, but it will have an enemy, right? So then what we can do is we can take this, make sure these are zeroed out values. Let's just zero them out here, reset. And we'll make sure that this is zeroed out here. This is important that these are zeroed out. Okay. But tile 1, notice tile 1 and tile no enemy and tile with enemy. So let's see what tile with enemy looks like. So if I pull this in, see tile with enemy and tile no enemy. Let's see if that fixes my problem. So then what I can do is in my level, right, instead of putting tile 1 and tile 2, I can put the tile no enemy and tile with enemy. So tile no enemy, tile with enemy. And let's try that out now and see if that gives me a better result. Right, pretty cool. What does it give me? It gives me this. So I got 3 of one type of tile and 1 of the other. Excellent. Okay, what about if I have bigger? So if I said I want a 20 by 20 tile set. So 20 by 20, then I can get something that's massive. And let's see what that looks like. It looks like this. Right? 20 by 20. And that looks really neat, right? It looks kind of random. It's turned around. It's much bigger, you know, and everything else, right? So it gives us this sense of random tile generation. It's not organic in any way. It's totally random the way this is done. And this is good and bad, right? And now the problem we have is how do we add a nav mesh so it works like with this entire tile? Well, we can use instead of using the standard nav mesh, what we're going to do is we're going to put a nav mesh component on this thing, okay? So remember when we go to navigation, if I look at navigation as an example, you can see that, and if I go to bake, it says, hey, learn about the component workflow. And the component workflow, what you need is another project called nav mesh components, this workflow here, right? And what you have, you get a new nav mesh surface and a nav mesh modifier and a nav mesh modifier volume and a nav mesh link. You get all these things, all right? And what this does is it comes into a bunch of assets. So these are assets, gizmos, and nav mesh components. Those two things is what I need. So let's download the project. And by the way, I'll give you this link up online. So I'll take this link and put this inside of our lesson for today. So new link. And this is the project, nav mesh components. So this is the Unity nav mesh components project. Okay, that's what it is. So, and what we want to do is we want to download this thing. Did I pick the wrong one? I did. That's okay. I can always get it back. That's why I made the link. There it is. There's my nav mesh components link. And what I want to do with this one is download it. So I want to click on code. I want to download zip file. I think I already have it. Maybe not. Here's my nav mesh components link. I'm going to I'm going to put it, it's in my downloads now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop this nav mesh components inside of our desktop. So let's go to our desktop and I'm going to drag and drop this nav mesh components in there. And then I'm going to unzip it. So I'm going to say zip, unzip, nav mesh master. I'm going to say monster. And then inside here, you see that there are a bunch of things, but we don't need all of this. We need two folders. We need the gizmos folder and we need the nav mesh components folder, those two folders. So what I can do is I can go to my Unity project. So here's my Unity project. And inside of assets, I can pull those two things. So I can bring in nav mesh components, just drag and drop that folder. There it is. And I can also drag in gizmos. There we go. So gizmos. What nav mesh components gives us is a couple of things. Scripts, which are interesting scripts we have, as well as some gizmos that make things look a little different. Okay, so what I want then is in level, right, in the level, I don't want a nav mesh anymore. What I want instead is, if I start typing nav, I get the following things. I get nav mesh modifier, nav mesh volume, and nav mesh surface. Let's try nav mesh surface. Nav mesh surface, what it does is it says this. It says that I'm going to bake my surface and la 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 la, and that's what it's going to create. And it says, what type of object do I have? I have humanoid. My collection of objects is going to be all. What I want is children. So only the children. And do I want to include, what layers do I want to include? Do I want to include all the layers inside here? No, I don't. In fact, all I want is the ground layers. Anything that's ground, that's marked as ground, is what I want to include. So to be safe, what I want to do is I want to go to resources, prefabs, and make sure that these two things are also part of the ground layer, right? Make sure that these two things are part of the ground layer. So only the ground gets changed, not enemies. Okay, so if I put enemies in there, it's not going to work. It's not going to matter. All right, so that's what I want. So in the level then, I have this new thing called nav mesh surface, right? And the nav mesh surface is going to generate, as soon as I run the code, anything that's inside the level game object, it's going to generate a nav mesh surface. Okay? That's what this is going to do. So I can, now, well, what I need to do is, as soon as it comes inbound, I need to bake it. Let me give you an example. So let's do it by hand. So let's just run this first. So I run it. And I have this massive thing, right? These massive, kind of tiles. But if I look here at the tiles, each individual tile, right? If I look at this tile, there is no nav mesh, right? You would be able to see it at this point if I was going to look at it. You would see a nav mesh with some kind of navigation, right? Because I want to be able to create this. But if I go to level and if I look at I want to bake the nav mesh, right? So this is showing the nav mesh. So this is, and I want to bake it. I want to be able to bake it, ahead of time, right? So if I don't do this, and if I click bake, there's nothing in there. So example would be if I put two tiles in there right now. Let's say, for example, I put in like this one and I put in this one. Okay, so level these two tiles, and let's space them out. And I didn't by hand. So if I kind of put them in by hand, and let's just make it so that it is like this. I just put these two tiles in there, and I want to bake these two tiles. So I want to do this when the level loads, right? I want to bake the tiles. So for now, let's just disable, I want to disable my level controller, just for now. So get rid of that just for now, and run it. But before I do that, I want to bake my mesh. Click bake, and if I look at the levels, now then what we should see is each one of these things, right, as long as they're part of the ground layer, should have a nav mesh. That's what it should have. Okay, so that's what if I was to bake my children, right? So that's the first piece. The first piece is we want to make it all, want to bake them, right? So that's what happens if I want to bake my nav mesh. Now, what's occurring for me is, in order for me to see them, right? Again, if I was to look at the objects, right? They're not baked like normal. I'm not baking them as baking each individual one. They're going to be baked as components. All right, that's a different thing. I don't have any agents yet and whatever, but the objects, what I want is for in here, when I look at them, I want these to be baked at runtime. So when I run this thing, then I want these two things to be baked. Let's make sure I turn on gizmos. Right, there's what we saw before. And let's just do one more thing, because I wasn't seeing that, the gizmos. Let's make sure that we clear all the things that are pre-baked. So otherwise we get some weird stuff out. So this, look what happened. So when on runtime, it baked my areas for me, right, by clicking bake. So if I stop it, if I start the game, then you can see that I got this thing baked. Okay, now if I clear the level, so I go here and clear, so I should be able to clear the baked level. So I go level, and I clear, none of it's baked. And if I run it again, it doesn't already bake. It doesn't bake for me. I have to bake it myself, right? So there's a bit of a script to follow. And if you go to the examples, they've got some great examples here in their sample packages. So if you go to assets, and if you go to examples, right, they have some nice scenes in here where you see like they have different orientations and everything inside here. But what they have is we want to get access to a surface, right? That's what we want to get. We want to get access to a surface. And what we want to do is we want to activate the surface on awake. So going back to this, we don't want this to happen. We don't want manual tiles going in there. We want automatic tiles going in there, like we said before, right? So we want to turn this level controller back on, but now we're going to add another script inside the level controller. So inside here, what we want instead of the way we're doing it is on awake. So this is before start. On awake, again, it happens in order like this: void awake. And what we want to do on awake is we want to pre-bake our stuff, but we need a reference to the surface, our nav mesh surface. So now we're going to talk another little area here where we're going to say header. We'll say that this is navigation. One day when it feels like updating. Come on. Oh, it's really working hard here. Navigation. And we'll say that we want a nav mesh surface. A nav mesh surface, which we're going to just call surface. All right, so nav mesh surface. We're going to make it private, so we don't care about it. And then on awake, we want to build our nav mesh. So we want to build nav mesh, right? And what this build nav mesh does is it bakes it. So that's what happens on awake. But we need to get a reference to our surface object, which we're going to do. By the way, we should do this like surface is equal to get component nav mesh surface. We do that first, and then as soon as we get a reference to the component, we bake it. We build it right away. Okay. But the problem with this, if we did it like this, then what happens is we don't have tiles to build yet. They build on start. So here's where we build our world. Let's make a new function called build world. So some kind of private function returns void. We'll call this build world. And we'll call this build world function here, where we build a world. And now let's think about where we need to build the world. Should we build the world first and then bake it? Or should we bake it and then build the world? Well, we definitely want to bake it afterwards. So we're going to kind of put this here, but we're going to build the world there. So build world here, bake it here on start. And then we have our update function if we need an update function in there. All right, let's see how this works. Does it work at all? So again, going back. Let's not make it so big at first. Let's go and make our level. Let's make our level something reasonable, like, again, 2 by 2. Just so we can see the mesh, right? That it's built everywhere. And if I press play, if we did everything right, then we should be able to see our stuff, but we have our problem. It says source mesh plane. It says build nav mesh data, nav mesh surfaces, right? And it says that source mesh plane does not allow read access. Okay, this is easy to fix. So what this means is that we're trying to access tiles and we're trying to mess with the tiles. Because we generated them in Blender, you might also download tiles from another package or something. And you have your mesh, which is right here, right? This is your plane. So this is your plane right here. We downloaded this from Blender, right? This whole tile, and this is your other tile. 2 tiles from Blender, tile and tile 2. So tile, under model, we need to turn on read write. So where it says read write enabled, we need to click this on and then click apply. And the same thing goes with tile 2. Tile 2, we need to go click read write access and click apply. Might as well do it to the pillars. So this pillar that we have right here, we'll click on read write access and then click apply. So all those ones have read write access. All right, let's try this again. So we'll run it again, and we should have everything built now. And let's take a look and see what that looks like. So if I go over here and we look at our tiles, we click on the tile and look at the level, you can see that it's been dynamically built with our mesh, which is way better than us baking it ahead of time. And this means that I can build my level and it'll build my mesh much better than what I had before. Much, much better. Okay, cool, I like it. So that means, what if I made it something like 10 by 10? Will it build all of those? So 10 by 10, run it, and let's see what it does. And then it will build my mesh 10 by 10. Look at that. Everything I built, all those things got built out. And that's way nicer than what we had before. Like super nice, right? And it looks great too. And we have navigation. All right, great. So that part is now working. So that whole idea of making a walkable surface that is children only, using the ground layers that we're targeting. And the reason that we were being stopped here was because of those. Okay, cool. So we have 2 tiles. Tiles, as an example, with those are the 2 resources we have. 2 tiles, right? Tile no enemy, tile with enemy. How about tile with enemy? Let's bring that in and make an enemy kind of happen, right? We want to put the enemy in there. And what I want to say is when the tile is generated, it also generates the enemy. And we can put it in a special spot. So we can say that whenever the tile is generated, right, we want to put the enemy, and we got to be careful about this because we want to make the enemy so that it is also smart, right? And by the way, notice that there's a little icon there. And if I look at navigation, like there is no navigation in there, but there's going to be, okay? So I want to put the enemy right in the middle, and I want to take my enemy. So there's going to be a lot of enemies. So if I have 10 tiles, 10 by 10, then there's chances are I might have like a lot of enemies in there, right? It's a lot of enemies. And what I might need is yet 1 or 2 more tiles that have, only one of them has an enemy, and the other ones have other configurations. So let's get a tile with enemy, and let's put an enemy in there. So I'm going to go into the enemy prefab and drag and drop it in. And let's not put this enemy in there. Let's put a real enemy in there. Like crypto. He should be the enemy that I put in there because he's the one that I worked on a lot, right? Crypto is our enemy. All right, so let's just grab our crypto enemy and drag and drop him in there. There he is. And let's put him at 0, 0, 0 for now. But what we also want to do is put him slightly above the ground level. So he'll drop in just after tile formation, something like that. And I also don't want to see his marker, so let's not look at his marker anymore. But that is our tile with enemy. Okay, so then what I'll do is tile with enemy includes an enemy, and I'll go to override and I'll say, so this is interesting, right? So how do I add this one in? Because I'm adding an object in here. Well, I got to put our friend crypto inside the tile. So I'm going to say something like, okay, tile with enemy is like this. So crypto is inside the tile. They belong together now, right? And then what I'll do is tile with enemy, I will apply all. So all tiles are going to have crypto inside of them, which means that I don't need necessarily to box them with the enemy anymore. So goodbye, enemies. There we go. Now this is dangerous, guys, because what this means is the bigger I make my world, the more enemies I have. All right, let's see, and let's see what problems we might have as well. So level, and then tile with enemy and tile no enemy. Let's make it smaller, please, 3 by 3, and then press play and see what happens. All right, so let's see what's going on here. So I got a dude that's here. I got some, this is Z fighting that I've got going on here, only because I'm looking at the instance. And you can see that they've crossed over and they got random, if you notice what happens, they've got random line of sight. One guy's got me in their sights, as an example. If I go to the simulator, and where did I appear, right? I appeared on top of a random location, and I'm getting beat, like to an inch of my life kind of beat, right? A lot of enemies, right? And then if I fall, then I regenerate back where I was. You can see also that there's a bit of a problem. They run together, they're in sequence, but I'm generating myself way up here, right? And the reason for this is because I'm randomly being placed in the world where I am. So one thing we could do, and if again, let's bring up my mini map here. You can see that there's a bunch of enemies that are almost on top of each other, kind of thing, right? So if I run, you can see that I'm probably going to be knocked into oblivion by these guys because there's a lot of them, and they're all going to attack at the same time. They even have the same stance as you know, they know where I am. Remember, my line of sight is not perfect, right? But you can see that they're coming towards me. There's a lot of them. There's more. They're going to beat me up. Okay. So that's kind of it. But what I can do is I can try and load the game and it'll teleport me where I'm supposed to be to safety, right? And you can see that they're all running towards me now and finding the closest path to kill me, right? There we are. And then they're all over here. But when the problem they have is there's no way for them to get on top because they have no path. One thing that we've figured out is there's no path for them to get up on the top. So when I created my tiles, let's go back to this, and I said tile with enemy. Let's go back to that tile with enemy. What I need is a way for the enemy, if I'm going to be up top here, the enemy has to have a way of getting up top there too. So they should be able to leap on top of there. And what we can do with that is we can have another nav mesh object that can do that. I can add a component, and I can call this a nav mesh link. And I can add it for the tile with enemy, right? And I can add a bunch of them that I want. One thing I know is that it's got to go up a certain amount, right? So we need to go up, oops, undo. I need to go with my tile with enemy, and my start point on the y-axis, it's got to be like, this is my start point. It's got to be kind of something like this. So like 3. Or maybe even 2. So I just want to see, I want you to see what this looks like. So this is 2, and I want to do the same thing with my endpoints. There's a start point and an end point. And what we want is for the start point and end point to start and end in different places. You can also have with nav mesh links, you can have if it is bidirectional or not. Like, do they come up? You know, do they have the same ability to come up and down? Here, obviously, they can't jump. It's too tight. But maybe what we can do is we can take this start position, and I can move the start point where I want, and I move the end point where I like, right? And I can say that the endpoint is going to be somewhere down in here, where I can have a nav mesh link to get on top of here somehow, right? So now I can put the endpoint to 0, which is down there, and that creates a jump point, right, where I can leap from. Look, notice there's a little thing here. And what I want is for the start point to be something like in here, in the middle, right? So I have a link that I've created for this little guy to go up and down. And I have one link right there. Maybe we want to make another one identical to this one on the other side. So let's do that. So we'll say that I want to duplicate this. So we'll just do a copy component. And then we'll say paste as new. Now we have 2 of them, the exact same. And what I'll do is I'll take my start position on the x-axis, this part. Let's undo that part, or maybe, sorry, on the z-axis. And we'll move it to the other side. And we'll do the same thing with the other one. So this is the endpoint. So now I have 2 start. They can kind of jump on the top of this really weird T here. And they have 2 points where they can do that over here, so that I can't run away. If I jump on top of these things, they'll follow me. And that's what this is going to do. Okay. And I have this middle point here where I can make the width of my jump as much as I want. Okay, so kind of like it'll look like that. Okay, you can't see it right now because we just have the top and the bottom. And let's do the same thing. I'll add 2 more. I'll add 1 there and 1 there, so they can jump on top of that. And they'll be able to jump between these things too. So let's add another one. So we'll say add component nav mesh link, and we'll make this time the top's the same. So the Y component start and finish will be at the same level. Move the X component, and it's kind of hard to see from this side. Let's go to the top view for a second, so you can see what I'm talking about here, right? So here's my top view, and I'm just making little jump points for these things so that the enemy has knows where to go for where they're moving. So start and end point. So let's move our start x-axis, move it over there, in the middle of that one, and our z-axis, right? I'll keep it on where it's supposed to be. And you can actually click on these things, right, and move them exactly where you like. And the endpoint, what I'll make it so that it is on this side. Let's make it in the middle here, and let's push this one up there. So that'll be the start and end point. So that you can jump across over here. So you can go down here, jump across there, and that'll be a link. And we'll make these 2 points here also duplicatable. So we'll say that, you can see that there's a bunch now. I want to make these 2 points. I want to duplicate this one. So, so copy. And then we'll paste as new. Now we have another one. And then we'll do the same thing with the beginning and end points, right? So again, we want this one to be on this side, right? And what we want is the z-axis also to be, for the endpoint, the z-axis, we want it to be undo on this side. So you can see that now this one can jump down in here, right? So you can kind of jump down here, jump down there, go across there. And now what we'll do is we'll make a copy of this one. So we'll say copy, and then paste as new. And then what we'll do with this one is we'll just grab the new one, pulls all these ones up. And they open up by default, by the way, unfortunately. But we want to be able to move these ones around. So start point, we want to move the Z over here. We want to move the Z over here. So start and end points, looks like they're pretty good now, right? So now we have ways to jump on it. You have ways to jump on it, and you have ways of jumping off the start and end points. And then now the only thing that's left is these corners, and they're not going to be able to get there. All right, so that's one thing. I'm not going to make it so that there's, and if you want, you can make it, like right now it's very symmetrical. You can make it so that there's one corner that it can get to, you know, or maybe from here to there or from there to there. It's up to you. Maybe we'll make it so there's one there and there's one over here. So it's asymmetrical a little bit. And that will give the path of this thing. Remember, every one of these tiles is going to have all these links, right? So let's add two more. So again, what we want to do is we want to copy the one that we already have that's over here. So we made this one, right? That one there, that's in the middle. Let's copy that one. So copy, right? Copy component, and then we'll add as new. So go here and add as new, paste as new. And then what we'll do is we'll just change these values again, the values that we have on the X and Y. So we'll move the X where we want it. And then we'll move the Y, move this X over here, and move the Z over here, and the X over here. So we have a link that goes across from this one to this one. So we have a way of getting across. So think about these as pathways, right? That's what they are. So they're pathways for the enemy to jump around and do stuff. Now, since we have this one, I can make one over there, and we'll be done. There's a lot of them already. This is, the more we put, the more complex the path will be, right? So we've already done a lot. Too many things, by the way. So we'll copy this one, copy component, and then what we want to do is paste as new, paste as new. And now what we'll do is we'll take that one, we'll take the start and end. Let's collapse all these. Take the start and end, so the X axis of this one, and we'll put it way over here, right? Way over there. And we'll take the X axis of the other one and put it way over there, right? But we'll flip them so that this one goes over there. So we'll say the Z axis is going to be way over there. So that gives us a chance to create a pathway for this component, right? This component here. So you can see that there is a component there and there's a component there. So that gives us all the pathways, as an example, to go from up, down, across, and so on. All right. Let's save this. And then what we want to do is we want to go to overrides, and we notice we added all these links. We want to apply all those links to the override. So now all prefabs are going to look like this. Cool. So let's get rid of this enemy now. Finally, that's a lot of work. Delete. And then let's do it again. Let's calculate what we're going to look like. So on the level, 3 by 3, and half of them, maybe half of them are going to have enemies. So let's press play. And when we look at the nav mesh links now, right, we should have a bunch of them with enemies. And it says by accident, by somehow, by some means. In this case, we had tile no enemy. In some way, tile no enemy. All right, let's try it again. So try again. That's impossible. That doesn't make any sense. See why we're not getting that. And now we're a little better. Okay, now we got, in this case, we have tile with enemy. And let's see where those enemies are. Are they even active? So there's our enemy, and he is doing his little idle dance, right? And here's my player, and you can see that my player happens to have landed and this is something that we have to prevent. My player has landed inside of the world. That's something we never thought about because we're spawning him right there, and we need to kind of move that spawn point up. So let's do that. So let's make our spawn point for the player appear way higher than this, right? So spawn point, I want the player and the spawn point to be the same. Let's move it like up, and the player is going to fall down onto the level. And what we want is for our player object also to be positioned higher up, just a little bit, like something like that. And let's see what happens there. Now that's going to cause an issue potentially, but let's see what happens. So now we fall down onto the world, and where is my player? My player is randomly on the edge of the issue. Can I move? So is there a problem moving? What happens? Am I dead? Well, no, but how come the enemy's not chasing me? It says failed to create agents because there's no valid nav mesh, right? So that's something that's an issue. No valid nav mesh, so we can't create the agents, and that's now they're not going to chase me. And why is that? Because nav mesh needs an agent in order for it to be, or the agent needs a nav mesh in order for it to do anything. Otherwise, it's not going to know what to do, and it's going to fail. So that's kind of what is going to happen. So how do we remedy that one? Well, it's almost like we want to make them fall onto the world as well, right? So if I go back to tile with enemy, there's some careful stuff we have to do. Remember that our enemies don't have any, we don't have any, we don't have any rigid body. We don't have any rigid body, right? So the problem that we're experiencing right now is that the enemy that's being teleported onto the world, which is this guy, he is going to appear on here without actually having a nav mesh first. So first we generate all the tiles, and when I generate all the tiles, then this guy is here as well, right? And what I need to do is we need to either remove him for now, then put him back later. So in other words, like take him away from the mesh whatsoever, like actually disable them, generate the tiles, disable and enable all of them, right? So after the tiles have been generated, wait for 30 seconds before we build our mesh. Like basically get our agent, our mesh on there first, then add the agent on afterwards. Otherwise, it's no good. All right, so we have to kind of add our agent in after the fact. So this is part of our generation process, right? Is what we have to look at. So how do we do that with our guy, right? Because our tile with enemy comes with this guy crypto, right? He comes kind of piling in here right away, and nav mesh agent is kind of automatic. It comes kind of on right away. Can't create a nav mesh agent unless I have a nav mesh. So what I do is disable it by default. Now we need a little bit of a script that happens when this thing is spawned. So when the tile with enemy is instantiated, I need a script just for this tile with enemy. So I have a bunch of nav mesh links, and let's add another script. So I'm going to put another script. So we'll call this a create C# script, right? And how about we do that again, because that's terrible what we just did. Let's do that. Sorry, moving things around does that craziness. Let's do that again. Great. C# script, and we rename it right away to kind of we want to generate our enemy, or we want to enable enemy. Enable enemy, right? That's what it is. And this is going to be tied to the tile with enemy tile object. So let's put that in, tile with enemy, and we'll say let's enable enemy And what the enable enemy will need to do is get a reference to the enemy itself, a nav mesh. So it'll say, okay, I want to get public nav mesh agent. I want to get that nav mesh agent. We'll call it agent. And what we'll say is, we'll drag and drop this one, because this is going to be something we always have. A tile crypto is always going to have a nav mesh agent on there, right? And by default, it's disabled, right? And what we want to do is we want to wait a bunch of seconds. So we're going to start a coroutine. So we're going to have a coroutine that's of type IEnumerator. So this is a coroutine to wait, some seconds before spawning or enabling AI to work. We want to wait for this generation to take effect and then enable the AI. And this coroutine is going to be some time to wait. So we'll make it a public float delay, whatever that delay is going to be. We'll set the delay to 1 second for now. So we'll delay a second before it starts. That's a big, long time. But what we want is a type of IEnumerator, and we're going to call this enable. We'll call this, enable nav mesh agent. That's what it'll be. That's what it's going to return, and we're going to return a new wait 4 seconds, and I want to put in the delay time that I want to wait. Yield return, new wait 4 seconds. And what I want to do is I want to enable the script. So I'll say that my agent, right, I want to enable is equal to true. I want to enable the script. And then what I want to say is I want to stop my coroutine. So stop coroutine, right? And it's going to be this one, enable mesh nav mesh agent. Otherwise, it'll keep on enabling the agent over and over again. This is almost like an interval. Every second, it'll enable the agent. We don't want that. We only want it to do it once. And on start, we want to say that we want to call or start coroutine, and it's going to be called enable nav mesh agent. So that's going to start the coroutine once. We really don't need an update function because we're only going to do it one time. So that is our little script for starting, just waiting. It's going to be a delay of some time before the nav mesh agent's enabled, which is going to make it so that it should work. Let's try that out. And let's see if this works. We should have our nav mesh agent plus a delay of 1 second. And let's also save this as a script, and we'll delete this one. And let's try it out now, and let's see if we still get that error down here, failed to create. All right, so this is something else now. So now it worked, but now the biggest problem is that it's a set destination can only be called on an active agent that has been placed in a nav mesh, right? That's also something that is a problem, right? So we need to do a little bit of script adjustment again, because our dude, which is right here, one of them was close enough that he dropped at the same time as my guy. It's another error that we're getting, right? Because we're trying to say, okay, let's get destination on the player transform, kind of stuff, right? But we can't get a destination on the player transform set destination if there's no player yet. Player's not on the mesh, then it's not going to work. So it's almost like we need to delay even more, right? So 1 second wasn't enough. My player has to drop on the scene somehow, and then it's going to be more than a second for it to wait. So let's just delay a little bit more than a second. So again, our level, go back to our level. Let's delay even more. So what we're going to say is each of our agents, our enable enemy, in our prefabs, in our my tile with enemy, what we want to call is this delay will be 2 seconds. So we'll wait 2 seconds, give a player a chance to land, and then we'll come out of them. So save. And then we get 2 of these happening anyway. So let's just look at this again, 1 sec. Right, so clear these up. And if I run it again, even though we're waiting 2 seconds, we could get this issue. Let's try it again. Just going to generate it over and over again and see if we get these issues. Right, because if we do, that means our script is not working properly. We shouldn't get any errors ever. Oh, but we got them. All right, so look, happened a couple times now. So why is that? It also depends on where my player lands. So not only does it happen, but what if my player lands on a corner or something? Right, that's an issue. Right, so let's take a look at that. So if we look at the first case, right, where my player, if I generate the script again, I'm okay. But let's see why I'm okay, right? Because when I look at my player is on top of this mesh, right? So if I was to move them, then as long as my enemy gains line of sight somehow, as long as my enemy gains line of sight, then they're going to come after me, no problem. See? And he's going to be able to get me because I can't hide anywhere anymore. And this is good. This is a good thing, right? But what about if my player doesn't land properly? And this is what we're encountering. So we need almost like a start tile. My start tile where my player is always going to be landing. It's going to be like the first tile where my player starts off. And that's a third tile that we need, which is tile with player, right? And now I don't want to spawn this one, but it's our player tile or whatever, right? And we don't have such a tile, but I'm going to use it so that it is kind of a start tile, and we can make it so that it's 16 by 16. We'll call it a tile, but it'll just literally be like just a plane, so nothing in there. So let's try this out. So I'll make a new tile. So create a new 3D object. We'll call this a plane. We'll make it a ground. We'll call it the start tile. There's my start tile. And we'll make this, it has to be exactly 16 by 16. Now, 1 by 1 doesn't mean it's 1 by 1. 1 by 1 is actually quite large for what it is, right? And when we put our player on this tile, if I put another tile in here, just to give you an idea of what that looks like, it is actually a little bit smaller than what we have, right? So let's do this so that my tile, my start tile is 0, 0, 0. And what we'll do is this tile 1, we're just using it for measurement. It's not the actual tile, but the tile 1 will be, you can see that it's kind of like at a 16, it's 16 by 16, right? And this looks like this needs to be a little larger. And the way to measure this with the tiles, we take the player tile and we use this, and we can move this across until we are about right there. And you can see that it's about 1.6, right? 1.6 wide, and on the z-axis 1.6 like so. So this is kind of what it is, 1.6 by 1.6. We can get rid of this tile. So now it's the same size, 1.6 by 1.6 in terms of thing. My position will be 0. And let's put a material on it, because we want some kind of ground material to be on this. So we don't really have a material that's in here. And we'll make it so that it's a different material color so we can see what it is. So we'll make a new material. Again, this is going to help us with our generation. A new material called the start tile material. And we'll make the start tile material maybe a different kind of color, like a grayish color, light gray. And we'll grab that and put it in there. So make it so that it is maybe a little darker. There we go. So we definitely have a kind of grayish material. One thing I don't want is metallic sheen on it, so we'll make it so it's very flat, kind of a flat color to it, right? And this will always be inside the level. So this start tile will always be in the level at 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay, this is going to affect our generation. And what we want to do is we want to put the player dead center. So now we're going to say that it's 0, and the x, y, z is 0, and the we're going to put this right kind of at the bottom here. And the same thing goes to the start tile. So 1.7, we'll quick it like 1.8, so it's exactly where it's supposed to be. And this spawn point is also going to be there, 0, 0, 1.8. Okay, this is where it's going to start. Okay, so a different color. There's the player, and it's going to always get a nav mesh because inside the start tile. But we have a problem. Our problem is that we already have a 1x1 tile. We already have a 1x1 tile. So therefore, we have a problem with generation. Generation says that it's going to take our first tile, then add 1 to it on this side, right? So actually, you'll place a tile here, and we don't want to do that. We want to skip by the first tile that we want to do. So with the first tile, we want to say if it's tile number 1, we want to skip it. That's what we want to do. So we'll still have 3x3, but we'll skip the first one. How to do that? That's a bit of an algorithm change. Let's go into our level controller and adjust that. So okay, so let's think about how this is going to work. So width of 0, length of 0, we start going down, and if our length, we can measure the length or the count of our active tiles. If our active tile length is 0, right, and we're adding 1, don't do this. Skip. We're going to skip 1. We're going to continue. So we're going to say that, but the for loop will continue. So we want to make it so that the for loop is still going to go away from the main tile. So we're going to say that if our active tiles dot count is less than 1, right? Then what we want to do, we'll make it so that we'll do it the other way around. We'll say that if it's if active tiles dot count is greater than 0, then only then, if it's 1, then we'll do this. Otherwise, we won't do this. We'll only do it 1 time. So we'll still run through the for loop, but we'll miss the first one. Let's see if this works, or if this is going to not work. All right, so actually we should, else if it's not this way. So we'll say that if active tiles.count is greater than 0, right, then it'll do this. If it's not greater than 0, it'll skip this, right? It'll skip this, and it'll just iterate an extra time. So it'll go length will be 1, and then it'll be 1 width times 16. So it'll offset it by 16 on the x-axis, which is good. Any 16 anywhere is fine. So let's see if that works. So if I run it now, we'll have one tile that's always the same, and that's our level. Those are, but we don't get the other ones. Okay, let's see what happened. And do we get our baked mesh too? We have to see this being baked. Do we have an error? Level layout. Right. Sorry. Wrong. I got the right idea, but it'll never increment because it'll always be 0, right? So we want to do it the other way around. We want to say if it's less than 1, only if it's less than 1, then we want to do this 1 time. So we want to do this. We want to continue. Otherwise, if it's not less than 1, then do all this. Do this stuff if it's not less than 1. If it's 0, as an example, then continue. If it's not, then don't. Okay, see that. Let's try that again. Oh, we have to also make the start tile a ground tile. Sorry, that's why it wasn't giving us a nav mesh. All right, so let's see what it did now. And it still didn't do anything. Why is that? Did it give us a nav mesh? It did give us a nav mesh. So the nav mesh is this whole tile. But why, oh why, didn't it give us things? So what is active? If active tiles.count is less than 1, then continue. Oh yeah, we want to put this. So one I only say for the first tile. Okay, so I know what to do. So we need to add the first tile. Sorry. So we need to add the first tile. So we're going to say that this is public game object, and we're going to call this the start tile. That's why it's not doing it. Public start tile, and the start tile is going to be there, and we're going to grab the start tile and drag it in there. Yes. And the start tile is going to be added here, and then we're going to continue. So we're going to say that active tiles.add start tile. So we're going to add it 1. So we're going to do it first time. If it's less than 1, we're going to do it, then continue. We're going to skip out it. We're not going to do this anymore, right? And then we're going to come back here and keep going. Okay, let's see if that works. And actually, we can use an else as well. But let's keep going. Let's try that out now and see if it's crazy. Right. And so what it's done is it's given us that one tile that is always going to be the start spot for the player. And let's see if we can move around, right? And if the enemy is going to have a, sorry, I just do it carefully, right? He's going to kind of do that. We're going to be back here, but they're going to be able to find us every single time. He's going to try and kick us out of our spot, right? Because that's our enemy. We have no way of killing him, so we're going to keep on getting killed. But that's okay, because at least we have a start location for our stuff. Okay, this is good. What about if we had something bigger? Instead of 3 by 3, we had 10 by 10 now. And let's press play. Then let's see what that happens, how that goes on. Right, and let's take a look at the scene. You see there's no errors, and we can see that the scene is way more complex, and we have quite a few enemies that are in here that are very dangerous, and they'll kill us immediately. All right, so that's how it looks. Not bad. So this is one part of procedural generation, my friends. Now let's put this up on a device and check it out. So we'll say File, Save, File, Build, and Run. And we'll try it now on our device and see if it's okay. And so it automatically generates our nav mesh. This is the key to what we've done so far, right? Now we didn't get quite to Perl and noise, but I'll talk about it. There's another way of doing it if you're creating a creative world. And we'll get there. Now here's the great thing. If we have more tile assets, if I made 2 more tile assets with Blender and I put them in, then we could use those too. And you would have a nice selection of tiles, maybe not so many enemies. You want to cut those enemies down. One way to do that, of course, is to increase the number of tiles that you have that are non-enemy tiles in the list. You can add them more than once, right, as an example, which is very good. That's how we want it to be. All right, let's see what this does. So we've started our game. It takes a bit of time to start now. And you can see that we have a lot of enemies, like a ton of them, right? Look how many enemies we have, like a ton of enemies. Right? And we don't see any, but if I'm starting to go, you're going to see that they're going to start coming after me now, right? Once I start getting into play, there's going to be somebody that is going to be awake, enough that they're going to come after me, right? So once I get close enough, you see this guy's already running. He's got a path to me, and he's going to kick me into oblivion, right? and you know, he's going to keep kicking me and keep kicking me and killing me until I'm done, right? So this is pretty good. I like it. But one more change we have to make is we have way too many enemies, and that's causing us to have a bit of slowdown when it comes to generation. So what we want to try and do is make it a little bit more reasonable. And the way to do that would be to add some more tiles in there. So let's say if I had more assets, that obviously would be the best thing to do. We don't have more assets. I'm not going to go create one now. But we more assets would be better. Or what we can do is, for now, just for testing purposes, we can add the tile no enemy multiple times. So I can say, okay, I want to add only 25% chance for an enemy, right? And I want the tile no enemy to be in there 3 times. So there's 3 chances instead of equal chances. So there's 25% of my world is enemies, and maybe we make it even more. We'll make it so it's like you know, less chances, like maybe something that looks like this. So there's out of make it even. Maybe we'll subtract 1. Yeah, 0, 1, 2. Let's get rid of that one. Can I do that? Yeah, and put an enemy in there. Tile with enemy. Right. So that is like 4. There's a 20% chance we'll have an enemy right here. 20% chance. That's not as bad. So then when we generate it now, all we're doing is we're changing the mix of what we're looking at. And if I look at the scene, you can look at there's far fewer tiles with enemies and far more tiles without. Okay. That's kind of a lot better than it was before. All right, let's file, save, file, oops, file, save project, and let's put it up on our device now. So build and build settings, and we'll choose our actual mobile device and build and run. It's going to take a little longer to do because it's going to be a first build on our mobile device, but you can see how we're doing. We're making it so it's random, and it's the great thing about randomness and procedural generation is replayability. This is the big thing for replayability, right? Because we generate random worlds this way, and this is just one way. We're doing a very, very flat world. Maybe next week, if we have more time, we'll make it so that we use Perlin noise to create a 3-dimensional world. Where what I mean by that is like not a flat world at all, but actually some other features. Create another biome. And let's see how this works. I'm just waiting for this to copy over. As it's copying over, we should see our device pop up here with our latest and greatest build. Let's see if this works. And did it work? What happened? Okay, so we have a bunch of these. Oh, did my device freeze? It did. Hold on a second. Let's just bring it back up online. So we'll do it again. Sorry, just want to make sure that it's good to go because we're out of sync a little bit. All right, so that's this. Didn't side load nicely. And let's try that again. So we'll try and load it one more time because it didn't quite work. So build and run. Sorry guys, my device, my fault in this one because I didn't have this. It was sleeping. And again, there's some stuff I can clean up here. I'll clean up my device a little bit later. And it shouldn't have a problem because it's an incremental build again compared to last time. And we're good. All right, let's see what it looks like now. It's going to take a second to load because remember, this is where we might want to have a loading screen because we have quite a bit of resources, right, that we have here. And you know what? Maybe our jump would be better. So we see that we have a bunch of tiles, and we have some enemies that are up here. they see us, and they're going to find a path to us now. No problem. And even if I try and escape, as an example, can't escape far because even when I'm on top here, as long as they know where I am, they have a path to me now, right? So this is the thing. And let me just bring this in here so you guys can see it. They should definitely have a path to me, right? Where I am, right? And if I don't, it's going to do its best to find a way towards me. Now, one thing we didn't do is we didn't add any links, which is one thing that's missing. We didn't add any links to the other tiles. So that means when I'm in my other tiles, let's just kill these little apps here. When I'm in my other tiles, that's one last change we have to make. We'll give them one link, okay? So that we won't waste too much time because we're at the end. In tile no enemy, a mistake we made, right, or I made, if I go flash in there for a second, is there's no links to get up here. If I'm up here, there's no path for them to go to at all, right? So tile no enemy has no way of getting to me. Don't worry. The reason why there's this Z fighting right now is because of our start tile. Start tile's over there. We'll just take that away for a second. All right, so that's a problem for us. And so we need one of these. So I'll add a single component in here to our tile no enemy. We'll add a nav mesh link. We'll add one, okay? So nav mesh link, there it is. And we'll make these so that it is one of them. The start is 2 and the bottom is 0. And we'll make it so that there's a spot probably in the middle here. Maybe this is the only spot that they can jump up because there's no other room. Let me just take a look at that from above to see what that looks like. There might be a room here too. I'm not sure if it's better here or if it's better there, but I think I need one spot so they can get to me. So something like that. There needs to be a one way of getting up here. And the other thing is there's no way of getting here, 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 or here, right? So if this is connected to another tile, then we'll have a way of getting here. But the problem is if this island here is disconnected from this one or this one, then we'll have a problem. So let's add we'll add a couple more. There's no way. They won't have links. And if they don't have links, they won't be able to find me. And that's not fun. So make one there and we'll put that one. We'll put that one over there and we'll make sure that it's at the right level. Right now it's too low. So they can climb on one of them is going to be the same, but the other one is going to be, they're all going to be jumping across the other ones. Okay, so we'll make another one, nav mesh link, and we'll do the same thing. This time what we'll do is we'll make it so that it is just enough just to get to most of these. There's got to be a path to most of these things, right? Kind of thing. That's way too far, so that's going to be like something like that. That's okay. That's way too far. Move that a little closer because they're going to jump from here to there. It won't look right. And set another one, nav mesh link. They're all going to be on the top, right? So I'm only making one on the bottom, so it won't be as bad to generate. So there, and this one will be maybe over there. So there's all these different paths, kind of thing that you'll find, but it'll be one per, right? So it won't be so bad. And then these will be at 2s in terms of how they are. So this will be kind of like here, and that one will be over there. And we'll do it again. And we'll move this one over here this time, and that one over there. So they have a path to get me there, and this one will also be at level 2. So we have a path to go there, 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 there. The one that's not connected to this one. We'll make one path to get me here, and that's it. And then that's it. So let's see, where is this one now? This one is this. And this one will be there. And then we'll have enough of these so that there's no way that I'll be able to escape. They'll be able to get me from anywhere now. And this is how it should be. It shouldn't be like I should have ways of escaping. These ones will be 2. Just want to make sure that there's not, I haven't messed up anywhere. Because if I messed up, then it would be weird situation. Okay, so that's messed up. You can see right away that's a problem. So these ones, for whatever reason, I left at 2. So this one here, where's this one? So that one is that one. Can't leave any at 0. These are zeros. So these should be at 2. That's the problem. I just forgot these ones. Make sure that I didn't forget any of these. Because if they're at 0, they only should be on one at 0. Otherwise, we'll have a really weird looking maze. Okay, it looks okay. I think it looks okay now. All right, so let's save this. And now what we'll do is we'll go to the prefab, and we'll say that we will apply all. And let's get rid of this, delete, and let's regenerate the tiles one more time. So file, save project, then let's run locally, and then we'll push to the device, and we're done. Whoa. Let's run locally with a start tile. Let's run locally, and we'll start with our device, and then we're done. Like I said, okay. Okay, so that was an issue. So what happened there? So set destination, it happened for these guys that they couldn't find me, right, somehow. Let's try that again. Is that going to happen more often? It's going to be random like that, right? So let's see where these guys are. So there's a bunch of enemies, and on the tile, should be at the right level. Let's see what's happening here. Again, these are all little tweaks and fixes. There we go. Now, it doesn't matter if we're here or not. The enemy should have a path at this point. As long as they can see me, then they should have a path. There's no place that I should be able to escape at this point, right? Because there's always a path to get to me. My only concern about this is the fact that they're landing, they're connecting with me, and really far away from these guys by chance. I'm much closer now. They should be able to get to me. And the problem when you're testing with one device, it's like really hard. And sometimes you get this like situation where there we go. Come on, see me. I'm behind you. And that's also weird. If you notice here that where I am, just a flash to where my player is. Again, this is all part of the testing and part of making it playable. That my player is in a spot where, you know, again, the enemy's right there, but I got to find a way of navigating there, and the only way we can do that is to jump, because of the way my tiles don't fit together quite right. They don't quite fit together right. But my issue is not this, not when my player is fitting together. My issue is when I run and I get errors. And it happens randomly, and we got to find out when it happens. It only happens once in a while, but it does happen, where it's like my player kind of connects to my ground after my enemy does. And that shouldn't be the case. Okay, there. Okay, so this is where it's happened. It's not breaking my game, so theoretically it's tolerable. But it doesn't mean, it means the enemies won't move. The enemies that have been affected won't move at all. So that is definitely a problemo. because that should not be the case, right? Like, look at that. My enemy should be, it should be able to see me at this point, right? My little guy here, he's right in line with me. He's looking right at me, right? But yet, there. He's going to kill me. There we go. And that would be me dead, right? All right, well, let's try and put it to, the reason why this is happening again, and I'm not going to go on troubleshoot further because we're out of time, but the way this is happening again is when the player lands, right? The reason why that they're getting into this problem is the way we've written our script for our enemy, right? So if we go to the enemy prefab, just for a second, so if I go to a resources prefab and I go to crypto, and if I look at the crypto model and the enemy behavior, crypto behavior, right? The problem is this: if I have line of sight, I have line of sight with my player, but my player hasn't materialized yet. Like, there is no player yet. I have line of sight with them. I'm connecting, but I need to wait. It's like I need to wait just a second before I start, right? So it's almost like, I could delay more. The more I delay, the better, right? Because then starting this off will be better. The challenge is the amount of delay. We have to be careful, because what's happening is the enemy, right? There's already delay built into the level generation, right? So if I go back to the inspector, and if I look at the start tile, when it comes to generating my enemy, so from it's not here, it's actually in the enemy prefab, my tile with enemy has its delay. So I could give it more of a delay, 3 seconds. Challenge with this is the more I make a delay, the bigger delay I give it, the more chances that when I have a larger level, I need a bigger delay and a bigger delay. And again, this is like part of our algorithm improvement. We have to make it so that this little script here is something that's available other places. And like I said, the way to test it is to keep testing it over and over again, because you don't want a chance for the enemy to appear before the player. And that's what we're doing. We're basically waiting for the enemy's AI to turn on, almost giving the player 3 seconds. And you can give them more. You can give them like 10 seconds if you want, but that's what it's doing. It looks like it's much better with 3 seconds now compared to 2 seconds. 2 seconds might have been too short. Well, there you go again. So even afterwards, you can see that I've got like 150 errors, before the errors stop. They do stop at some point, right? But there was a point in time where I had 150 errors, where I couldn't find the player, even though after he beat me up a bunch. And this could be because of where I am, right, where the player, is relative to the enemies. These guys are going to come at me forever now, as they're going to kill me, right? So that's, kind of the effect of what this is. So again, I can increase this to 10 seconds. The longer I increase this, the bigger number that is, the much larger it's going to be when it comes to, it's going to take longer for them to find me. They won't start for 10 seconds, but then my generation might be 10 seconds, right? So chances are this is going to be okay. But it's really a delay tactic. It's not for sure. There's another problem we have to deal with, which is we have to check to see if the player's landed physically on the mesh, like they have connection with them before they check for line of sight. But for now, we're not doing them. So file, save project, and let's put this up on GitHub. So we'll exit here. This is where we're going to stop for today. Right, this is a pretty good place to stop. We've done our first level. One thing to read is some of the stuff that I put there for you guys. So I'm going to say git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say first draft of procedural world. Git push. And the reason I'm saying first draft is because really, you can keep going. I can keep iterating until I get a better improvement. Okay, so what do you need for the lab? I want you to show me the a couple of screenshots. So if I go back to Unity for a second, I need a couple screenshots of the random generation. Show me that you're able to generate the level. And here's what we covered today. We covered how to save properly. That took up a bit of time. I had to do that because there's an error from last week. The other thing we covered was the ability for us to randomly generate our mesh, our nav mesh, our navigation for the player. We randomly generate it now so that there is a fair amount of, you know, like there's going to be a path pretty much anywhere for the enemy to find them. So the path finding for the enemy is going to work now, no problem. And it's going to be randomized. We've randomized the position of our enemies in the world, right? So it's not just a random spot, but they're actually going to be in the middle of the tile. They're in an enemy tile. Well, we mentioned what would be better is if we had more tiles, but what we did was we, kind of spread out the enemy tiles by adding more non-enemy tiles that we have here. We talked about that. So taking a screenshot of this would be good when it's running. Taking a screenshot in game would be good, and that's probably good enough. All right, any questions before we go for the day? Okay, guys, for those of you who have other questions and you're watching this video, please join me on Friday. We'll resolve any kind of issues you have, again, during our live session. I'll go over all the challenges with you and everything else. We'll try and fix any problems you might have on the Friday. Thank you so much for sticking around, guys. I see a bunch of people still here. Franz and Ayan and Katuk and Subardna, thank you so much for coming out. And the people on YouTube, and I'll see you guys next week. Or on Friday, if you're going to come in for questions. And that's it for me, guys. Take care.